The armed men emerged from the darkness like ghosts, their tactical gear gleaming under the Montana moonlight. Marcus Sterling found himself surrounded, outnumbered 6-1, blood trickling down his face as the rifle butt connected with his ribs again. "Where are the girls?" The leader's voice was ice-cold professional, a man who'd done this before. Marcus spat blood into the snow, his vision blurring with pain. These weren't law enforcement. Their equipment was too expensive, their movements too coordinated. Someone with serious money wanted Lily and Rose back, and they were willing to kill for it. "You don't understand what you're protecting," the leader continued, raising his weapon. "Those children aren't normal. They're weapons." Marcus prepared for the end. At least the girls would have time to escape. At least Emma's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. Then the music started. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a melody so beautiful it seemed to emanate from the snow itself. Two small figures emerged from the tree line, hand in hand, singing in perfect harmony that bypassed the brain and spoke directly to the soul. If stories of impossible hope and chosen family touch your heart, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about the power of love, music, and miracles. Let's begin this incredible journey together. The snow had been falling for 3 days straight in Pine Ridge Valley, Montana, and Marcus Sterling was running out of reasons to get out of bed. The old farmhouse creaked with each gust of wind, its weathered bones protesting against another brutal winter. At 45, Marcus felt every one of those creaks in his own joints, reminders of the construction sites that had built his body and the grief that had broken it. He stood at the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the white blanket swallow his property inch by inch. The workshop behind the house sat dark and unused, tools gathering dust since he'd lost the heart for building anything 4 years ago. 4 years since the phone call. 4 years since Emma and Caleb never made it home from the grocery store. Marcus turned away from the window, unable to look at the snow-covered swing set in the backyard any longer. Caleb would have been 12 now, old enough to help with the firewood, old enough to complain about chores, old enough to fill the suffocating silence that had become Marcus's constant companion. The coffee tasted like ash, but he drank it anyway. Routine was all he had left. Coffee, breakfast, pretend to work in the shop, dinner, sleep, repeat. The bottle of whiskey in the cabinet called to him earlier each day, but he'd made a promise to Emma's grave that he wouldn't become that kind of broken. A crash outside made him look up, probably a tree branch giving way under the weight of snow. He pulled on his boots and heavy coat, grateful for any excuse to move, to do something useful. The cold hit him like a physical blow as he stepped onto the porch, snow immediately finding its way inside his collar. That's when he saw them. Two small forms huddled against the side of his old horse barn, barely visible beneath what looked like an oversized coat. Marcus blinked hard, certain the isolation was finally making him see things. But no, they were real. Children. Two little girls, identical in size and shape, pressed together like frightened animals seeking warmth. His heart hammered as he approached, boots crunching through the snow that came up to his knees. They couldn't be more than 6 years old, their faces pale as the frost around them, lips tinged blue with cold. One was conscious, staring up at him with eyes the color of storm clouds. The other lay still, so still that panic clawed at his throat. "Jesus Christ," or he breathed, dropping to his knees beside them. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" The conscious girl blinked slowly, but didn't speak. Her sister didn't move at all. Marcus pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around both of them, feeling how light they were, how cold. The coat they shared was too big, emblazoned with faded lettering, St. Mary's Children's Sanctuary. In the pocket, a crumpled piece of paper with 2 words scrawled in desperate handwriting, "Keep them safe, MG." Marcus scooped them both into his arms. Surprised by how little they weighed, the conscious girl's head lolled against his shoulder, and he felt her small hand clutch weakly at his shirt. He ran through the snow toward the house, his lungs burning with cold and fear. Inside, he laid them on the old leather couch near the fireplace and cranked the heat as high as it would go. The conscious girl's eyes followed his every movement, while her sister remained frighteningly still. Marcus knelt beside them, pressing his fingers to the unconscious girl's neck. A pulse, faint but steady. He exhaled a prayer he didn't know he still remembered. "I'm going to call someone," he told the conscious girl softly. "Someone who can help." He reached for his phone, then stopped. Who was he going to call? The sheriff would ask questions he couldn't answer. Child services would take them away, put them into a system that had already failed them once. These girls had found their way to his property in a blizzard, wearing nothing but a thin coat from some children's sanctuary. They'd been abandoned, or worse. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He put the phone down and knelt beside the couch again. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but you're safe." Dr. Sarah Chen had been hiding in Pine Ridge Valley for 6 months, and she was getting good at it. Good at avoiding eye contact at the grocery store. Good at deflecting questions about why a former pediatrician from Seattle was working part-time at the local clinic. Good at pretending that the empty house on Maple Street didn't echo with memories of David's laugh. Her husband had been gone 2 years now, killed in Afghanistan while serving as a field medic. The army had folded his flag with military precision and handed it to her with words about service and sacrifice. What they hadn't given her was a way to stop seeing his face in every child she treated. Hearing his voice in every song on the radio, Sarah had come to Montana to disappear, to find some corner of the world where grief couldn't follow. She'd found the corner, but the grief had tagged along anyway, sitting beside her at the breakfast table each morning, riding shotgun in her car, curling up next to her in bed each night. Her phone rang at 7:30 a.m. on that snowy Thursday, jarring her from her second cup of coffee and the medical journal she wasn't really reading. "Dr. Chen, this is Marcus Sterling. I need help." Sarah frowned. She didn't know any Marcus Sterling, but his voice carried an urgency that made her sit up straighter. "What kind of help? I found 2 little girls. They're hurt, cold. One of them won't wake up. Did you call 911? A long pause. "I can't. It's complicated, please. If you could just come look at them." Sarah closed her eyes. She'd moved here to avoid complications, to treat simple ailments and minor injuries without the emotional weight of pediatric trauma. But something in the man's voice reminded her why she'd become a doctor in the first place. "Give me your address." The drive to Marcus Sterling's farm took 20 minutes through snow-covered back roads. Sarah had packed her emergency bag by instinct, muscle memory from years of house calls and hospital rounds. The farmhouse that emerged from the white landscape looked like something from a Christmas card. If Christmas cards included the undercurrent of desperation she could feel even from the driveway. Marcus Sterling answered the door before she could knock. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of weathered hands that spoke of manual labor and the kind of eyes that spoke of deep loss. Sarah recognized the look. She saw it in her own mirror every morning. "They're in here," he said without preamble, leading her into a living room that felt frozen in time. Photos on the mantel showed a younger Marcus with a beautiful woman and a boy with his father's eyes. The photos stopped abruptly, as if life itself had stopped. But life clearly hadn't stopped, because on the couch lay 2 of the most beautiful children Sarah had ever seen. Identical twins with silver blonde hair and delicate features that would have been ethereal if not for the obvious trauma written in their stillness. Sarah knelt beside them, her training taking over. "How long have they been like this?" "I found them about an hour ago. Outside. In the snow. This one," he gestured to the conscious girl, "has been awake but won't speak. The other one." Sarah checked vitals, examined pupils, tested reflexes. Both girls showed signs of exposure and mild hypothermia, but nothing immediately life-threatening. The conscious girl, she'd have to think of names for them, watched every movement with intelligent, wary eyes. "They're going to be okay," Sarah said, and saw Marcus's shoulders sag with relief. "But they need monitoring, and they definitely need professional evaluation for trauma." "What kind of trauma?" Sarah met his eyes. "The kind that makes 6-year-old girls mute." She spent the next hour warming them slowly, checking their responses, looking for signs of abuse or injury. Both girls were thin but not malnourished, clean but not recently bathed. Their clothes were too big, clearly not their own. Most telling were the matching scars on their left wrists. Small, neat, surgical. Medical bracelets had been removed recently. Marcus, Sarah said quietly, these girls didn't just wander out of the woods. Someone left them here deliberately. The coat had a logo, St. Mary's Children's Sanctuary. Sarah's blood chilled. She'd heard of St. Mary's, a private facility for gifted children that had closed abruptly 6 months ago amid financial scandal. The children had supposedly been relocated to other facilities, but there had been rumors. We need to be very careful, she said. If these girls escape from somewhere, if someone's looking for them, as if summoned by her words, the previously unconscious girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, the same storm gray as her sister's, and found Sarah's face for a moment. No one breathed. Then, soft as a whisper, clear as a bell, the girl began to hum. It was the most beautiful sound Sarah had ever heard, a melody that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her throat, richer than her small lungs should have been able to produce. The tune was hauntingly familiar, something classical but transformed, made new. The conscious girl joined in, creating a harmony so perfect it raised goosebumps on Sarah's arms. The two voices wove together like threads in an impossible tapestry, each note placed with precision that spoke of professional training. Marcus stared in amazement. How are they doing that? Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. The melody was Amazing Grace, but arranged in a way she'd never heard before. Complex, sophisticated, beautiful beyond words. These weren't just traumatized children. They were prodigies. I don't know, she whispered, but I know someone who might. The Pine Ridge Valley Public Library was the kind of place that time forgot. Musty books, creaking floors, and a librarian who'd been there since the Eisenhower administration. Martha Kowalski had seen everything the valley had to offer in her 73 years, but she'd never seen Dr. Sarah Chen look quite so intense as she did that Thursday afternoon. St. Mary's Children's Sanctuary, Sarah said without preamble. What can you tell me about it? Martha's eyes sharpened behind her thick glasses. That's a name I haven't heard in a while. Private facility up in Glacier County, closed down about 6 months ago under mysterious circumstances. What kind of mysterious? Martha glanced around the empty library, then leaned forward conspiratorially. The official story was financial mismanagement. The real story. She pulled out a thick folder from beneath her desk. The real story was much worse. The folder contained newspaper clippings, printouts from various websites, and handwritten notes in Martha's careful script. Sarah read with growing horror about allegations of medical experimentation. Children kept isolated from their families, and a sudden closure that left dozens of gifted children unaccounted for. The facility specialized in musically gifted children, Martha explained. Children with perfect pitch, compositional abilities, the kind of rare talents that usually only emerge once in a generation. They claimed to provide specialized education, but parents started asking questions when they weren't allowed to visit. Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the pages. Photos of St. Mary's showed a sprawling complex in the mountains, all modern glass and steel that looked more like a research facility than a school. In one group photo, she could see children arranged by age, and there, in the back row, two small blonde girls who looked heartbreakingly familiar. There, Sarah pointed. Do you recognize them? Martha squinted at the photo, then nodded grimly. Lily and Rose Morrison. They came to St. Mary's when they were 4, after their parents died in a car accident, supposed to be temporary placement until relatives could be found. Morrison? Sarah's pulse quickened. As in the Morrison Foundation? The very same. One of the wealthiest musical foundations in the country. Those girls aren't just orphans. Dr. Chen. They're heiresses to a fortune worth millions. Sarah stared at the photo. Pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place. 2 gifted children with a massive inheritance, placed in an isolated facility, then disappeared when questions were asked. Someone had been using them, and someone else had saved them. Martha, I need everything you have on the Morrison family, and I need it quietly. The older woman's eyes glinted with understanding. Those girls you were asking about earlier, they wouldn't happen to be. I can't say. Martha nodded and pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. Then I guess you'll be needing this too. The Morrison file. I've been collecting information about that family for years. Fascinating musical dynasty, tragic losses, and a foundation that's been fighting legal challenges to those girls' inheritance since their parents died. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana winter. Legal challenges from whom? Distant relatives who've been trying to prove the girls are either dead or mentally incompetent. If they succeed, the entire Morrison fortune gets divided among them. Martha's voice dropped to a whisper. Word is, some of those relatives would go to great lengths to make sure those girls never surface to claim what's rightfully theirs. Marcus had never been good with silence, but the quiet that filled his house over the next 3 days was different from the crushing loneliness he'd grown accustomed to. This silence was full, filled with the soft breathing of sleeping children, the whisper of pages turning as Sarah read medical journals at his kitchen table, the gentle sounds of life being lived. The girls, he'd started thinking of them as Lily and Rose based on Sarah's research, though they still hadn't spoken, moved through his house like small ghosts. They ate the simple meals he prepared with careful politeness, accepted the clothes Sarah had brought from town with quiet nods, and followed him and Sarah with eyes that missed nothing. But it was the music that truly brought them to life. It started accidentally. Marcus had been working in his shop for the first time in years, building simple shelves for the girls' temporary room. When he heard the humming again, he'd left the radio on in the kitchen, playing an old country station, and the girls had begun harmonizing with whatever was playing. They didn't just sing along, they transformed every song into something richer, more complex. A simple Patsy Cline tune became a layered masterpiece. A classic rock anthem turned into something that belonged in a cathedral. They seemed to hear music in ways that shouldn't have been possible, finding harmonies that didn't exist until they created them. Sarah noticed it too. It's not just talent, she told Marcus on the third evening as they watched the girls from the kitchen doorway. It's like they speak music as a native language. They're having a conversation we can't understand. The girls sat on the living room floor, building block towers in perfect synchronization. As they worked, they hummed, wordless melodies that wove in and out of each other like conversations. When one would pause, the other would seamlessly take over the musical thread. Do you think they'll ever speak? Marcus asked. I think they're already speaking, Sarah replied. We just need to learn their language. That night, as they had every night since the girls arrived, Marcus and Sarah sat at his kitchen table planning their next move. The research Martha had provided painted a terrifying picture of corporate greed, legal manipulation, and children being used as pawns in a multi-million-dollar game. We can't keep them hidden forever, Sarah said, though her voice carried reluctance. Eventually, someone's going to come looking. Let them come. Marcus's voice was harder than she'd heard it before. Those girls have been through enough. Sarah studied his face in the lamplight, seeing something she recognized, the fierce protectiveness of a parent who'd already lost everything and wouldn't lose anything else. You know we're not their legal guardians. We have no rights here. Neither did whoever dumped them in a snowstorm. Before Sarah could respond, a soft sound drifted from the living room. Music, but different from the girls' usual humming. This was fuller, richer, multiple voices creating something that shouldn't have been possible with just two children. They crept to the doorway and peered in. Lily and Rose stood before the old upright piano Marcus hadn't touched since Caleb's death. The piano bench was too high for them, so they stood on either side, their small hands moving across the keys with impossible precision. The music they created was beyond beautiful. It was transcendent, a classical piece Marcus vaguely recognized, but arranged for four hands with a sophistication that belonged in concert halls. The girls played with their eyes closed, faces serene, as if channeling something beyond themselves. My God, Sarah breathed. They're playing Rachmaninoff. Is that good? Marcus, that piece is considered one of the most difficult piano compositions ever written. Professional pianists spend years learning to play it properly. She watched in amazement as the girls navigated a particularly complex passage without missing a note. They're not just playing it, they're interpreting it, making it their own. As the final notes faded, the girls opened their eyes simultaneously and turned toward the doorway where Marcus and Sarah stood, for the first time since they'd arrived. Both girls smiled, small, shy expressions that transformed their faces completely. Rose, the girl who'd been unconscious when Marcus found them, walked slowly toward him. She stopped just within arm's reach and, with careful deliberation, placed her small hand in his large, calloused one. "Daddy," she whispered, the first word anyone had heard her speak. Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. The word hit him like a physical blow, bringing with it a rush of emotions he'd kept buried for 4 years. Joy, terror, hope, and a love so fierce it took his breath away. He knelt to her level, his voice rough with emotion. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm here." Lily approached Sarah with the same careful deliberation. She didn't speak, but she placed her hand over Sarah's heart and hummed a few bars of a lullaby, one Sarah recognized as something David used to sing to the children in the pediatric ward. "How did you know that song?" Sarah whispered. Lily's answer was to hum another melody, Amazing Grace again, but in the exact arrangement David had hummed while working late at the hospital. It was impossible. There was no way this child could know that specific version of that song. Unless… "Marcus," Sarah said urgently, "do you have anything of Emma's letters? Recordings? Anything?" He looked confused but nodded. "There's a box in the attic. Personal things I couldn't bear to go through." 20 minutes later, they sat surrounded by the carefully preserved remnants of Emma Sterling's life. Photos, letters, sheet music, and at the bottom of the box, a small digital recorder. Sarah's hands shook as she pressed play. Emma's voice filled the room, warm, loving, singing a lullaby to young Caleb. But it wasn't just any lullaby. It was the same melody Lily had hummed, note for note. The girls' reaction was immediate and profound. They ran to the recorder, pressing their ears close to the speaker, tears streaming down their faces. Rose spoke again, her voice clear and strong. "Mama Emma saved us." The words hung in the air like a revelation. Marcus stared at the recorder, then at the girls, then at Sarah, trying to process what he'd just heard. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Emma died 4 years ago. These girls would have been too young to remember." "Not remember," Lily said softly, speaking for the first time. "She came to us. In the dark place, she sang to us when we were scared." Sarah felt the pieces of an impossible puzzle beginning to align. "The dark place, St. Mary's," Rose said, her voice growing stronger. "The man said we had to stay until we forgot our real names. But Mama Emma told us to remember. She said someone would come for us." Marcus felt tears he hadn't shed in years burning his eyes. Emma, his Emma, who died in a car accident on a snowy night 4 years ago, who'd been driving back from a weekend trip she'd never fully explained, who'd had sheet music in her car that he'd never recognized. "Girls," he said carefully, "what did Mama Emma look like?" Without hesitation, Rose walked to the mantel and pointed to a photograph. Emma and Marcus on their wedding day, her dark hair flowing around her shoulders, her eyes bright with laughter. "She had pretty hair," Lily said, "and she smelled like flowers. She said she had to go away, but she would send someone to take care of us." Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look of wonder and growing understanding. Somehow, impossibly, Emma had been involved in these girls' lives. Somehow, her death had been connected to their salvation. "There's more," Rose said quietly. "We're supposed to tell you about the others." "Others?" Sarah leaned forward. "The other children. Mama Emma saved 12 of us, but we got separated. They're still out there, still hiding." Lily nodded seriously. "She said when we found our new daddy, We had to tell him about the others. She said he would know what to do. Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't chance. This was Emma, reaching across the veil of death to finish something she'd started, to save children who needed saving, to give him a purpose he'd thought he'd lost forever. "Tell me about the others," he said, his voice steady with new resolve. And as snow began to fall outside, Lily and Rose began to tell a story that would change everything. A story of children hidden throughout Montana, of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power, and of a woman who'd given her life to expose the truth. The Morrison Foundation offices in Billings looked exactly like what they were. The headquarters of old money trying to look respectable. Marble floors, mahogany paneling, and portraits of stern-faced men who'd built their fortune on the backs of others. Sarah felt underdressed in her simple wool coat and hiking boots, but she'd learned long ago that confidence was more important than appearance. "Dr. Chen to see Mr. Harrison Morrison," she told the receptionist, a young man who looked like he'd stepped out of a catalog for expensive suits. "Do you have an appointment? Tell him it's about Lily and Rose." The change in the receptionist's demeanor was immediate and telling. The polite smile disappeared, replaced by something sharper, more calculating. He made a phone call in hushed tones, then gestured toward a leather seating area. "Mr. Morrison will be with you shortly." Harrison Morrison was exactly what Sarah had expected. Silver-haired, expensively dressed, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He was accompanied by a younger man in an identical suit who introduced himself as legal counsel. "Dr. Chen," Harrison said smoothly, settling into the chair across from her. "I understand you have information about my deceased brother's children. I understand you've been trying to have them declared dead." The smile faltered slightly. "That's a rather blunt way to put it. We've been trying to settle the estate of 2 children who disappeared from protective care 6 months ago. Their trust fund requires resolution." "Convenient timing," Sarah observed. "The trust fund matures when they turn 18. That's 12 years of interest you'd be gaining access to." The lawyer leaned forward. "Dr. Chen, I'm not sure what your interest is in this matter, but the Morrison family's financial affairs are private." "Child welfare isn't private, and neither is attempted murder." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Harrison's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "That's a very serious allegation. Dr. Chen, I hope you have proof to back up such claims." Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I have medical records showing repeated attempts to sedate and transport the girls against their will. I have financial records showing large payments from this foundation to St. Mary's Children's Sanctuary. And I have testimony from the girls themselves about what happened there." The lawyer's hand moved toward his phone, but Harrison stopped him with a gesture. "What exactly do you want?" "Dr. Chen, I want you to drop any legal challenges to the girls' inheritance. I want you to publicly acknowledge their survival and return to family care. And I want you to explain why a family foundation would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep 2 little girls in prison." Harrison stood abruptly, his composure cracking. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Those girls aren't just heirs to a fortune. They're dangerous. Their abilities, they're not natural. The things they can do with music, the way they affect people. You mean the way they create beauty, the way they bring joy to everyone who hears them. I mean the way they can manipulate emotions, influence behavior, make people believe things that aren't true." His voice rose with each word. "Do you know what it's like to hear a 6-year-old sing a song that makes grown men weep, to watch them play piano pieces that can induce hallucinations? They're not children, Dr. Chen. There's something else." Sarah stared at him, finally understanding the depth of his fear. "You're afraid of them. I'm afraid of what they represent. Music has power, real power, in the wrong hands, with the wrong training. Children like that could influence elections, start wars, control populations." St. Mary's was researching their abilities, learning how to harness them safely, by keeping them prisoner, by experimenting on them. The lawyer finally spoke up. "Dr. Chen, this conversation is over. If you have evidence of wrongdoing, present it to the proper authorities. If not, I suggest you stop making unfounded accusations. Sarah stood, gathering her papers. The proper authorities are exactly who I'm talking to next. Sheriff's Department, FBI, anyone who'll listen, and when they start investigating St. Mary's, when they start looking into the Morrison Foundation's financial records, when they start asking questions about Emma Sterling's death, Harrison's face went white. Emma Sterling was an accident. Emma Sterling was a hero, and her husband is going to make sure the whole world knows it. Sarah walked out of the office with her head high, leaving behind two men who suddenly looked very much like they were planning something desperate. The attack came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, swift and silent as a mountain storm. Marcus woke to the sound of breaking glass and the low hum of engines in his driveway. Training from his construction days kicked in. Assess the threat. Protect what matters. Fight like hell. Sarah, he called softly, but she was already moving, herding the girls toward the safe room he'd built in the basement after Emma's death. A paranoid precaution that suddenly seemed prophetic. 3 vehicles, Sarah whispered, peering through the curtains. Professional operation. Marcus grabbed the shotgun from his bedroom closet, hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Take the girls downstairs. There's a tunnel that leads to the storm cellar behind the barn. If I don't come for you in 20 minutes, use it. Marcus, go. Now. He watched her disappear with Lily and Rose, then turned his attention to the men spreading across his property. 6 of them, dressed in black tactical gear, moving with military precision, not law enforcement. Their equipment was too expensive, their movements too coordinated. Marcus slipped out the back door, using shadows and familiar terrain to his advantage. He'd hunted these woods since childhood, knew every tree and rock formation. The intruders might have superior numbers and equipment, but this was his ground. The first man went down quietly, taken out by Marcus's Louisville slugger before he could raise his weapon. The second managed to shout a warning before Marcus's tackle sent them both tumbling into a snowbank. But there were too many of them, and they were too well trained. Within minutes, Marcus found himself surrounded, shotgun empty, bleeding from a cut above his eye. "Where are the girls?" The leader's voice was calm, professional, a man who'd done this before. "What girls?" The butt of a rifle connected with Marcus's stomach, doubling him over. "We know they're here. Dr. Chen's visit to Morrison yesterday was very interesting. Made some people very nervous." Marcus straightened slowly, tasting blood. "Good. They should be nervous." Another blow, this one to his ribs. Stars exploded behind his eyes, but he remained standing. These men wanted the girls, and as long as he was conscious, as long as he was breathing, they wouldn't get them. "You don't understand what you're protecting," the leader continued. "Those children aren't normal. They're weapons, in the wrong hands. They could, in the right hands," Marcus interrupted. "They're just little girls who deserve to be loved." The leader raised his weapon, and Marcus prepared for the end. At least Sarah and the girls would have time to escape. At least Emma's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. Then the music started. It came from everywhere and nowhere. A melody so beautiful it seemed to emanate from the snow itself. The attacking men stopped mid-motion, weapons lowering as their faces filled with wonder. Marcus felt it too, a peace so profound it seemed to wash away years of pain and anger. Lily and Rose emerged from the tree line, hand in hand, singing in perfect harmony. They walked directly toward the armed men without fear, their voices weaving a spell of sound that seemed to bypass the brain and speak directly to the soul. The leader's weapon fell from nerveless fingers. Tears streamed down his face as he sank to his knees in the snow. His men followed suit, one by one, overwhelmed by music that reached into the darkest corners of their hearts and filled them with light. "Stop," the leader whispered. "Please, stop." But the girls didn't stop. Their song grew stronger, more complex, harmonies layering upon harmonies until the very air seemed to vibrate with sound. Marcus watched in amazement as these men, trained killers who'd come to kidnap children, wept openly, their faces transformed by something approaching transcendence. When the music finally faded, the silence that followed was profound. The leader looked up at Lily and Rose with something approaching worship. "What are you?" he breathed. Rose stepped forward, her young face serious. "We're just little girls, but our music remembers all the people who loved us. And all the people who need love," Lily added softly. The leader struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. "I... We were told you were dangerous." "Music isn't dangerous," Rose said. "Fear is dangerous. Anger is dangerous. Music is just... true." One by one, the attackers began removing their weapons, setting them down in the snow with reverent care. The leader pulled out a cell phone and made a brief call. "Mission aborted," he said simply. "Target is not what we expected." Marcus watched in stunned silence as the men retreated to their vehicles and drove away, leaving behind only footprints in the snow and the lingering echo of the most beautiful music he'd ever heard. Sarah emerged from the trees, her own face wet with tears. "How did they do that?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but I think we're starting to understand why some people are afraid of them." Lily took his hand, her small fingers warm despite the cold. "Mama Emma said our music could change hearts. She said that's why the bad people wanted to stop us. But we're not supposed to stop," Rose added. "We're supposed to help people remember what love feels like." Marcus knelt in the snow between them, this man who'd lost everything and found it again in the most impossible way. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll make sure your music reaches everyone who needs to hear it." Above them, the Montana sky began to lighten with dawn, and somewhere in the distance, other children were waiting to be found. The Pine Ridge Community Center had never hosted anything like it. For 70 years, the building had served as the town's gathering place for potluck dinners, high school graduations, and the occasional wedding. But on this snowy December evening, it had been transformed into something approaching magical. Sarah stood at the side of the makeshift stage, watching as families filled every available seat. Word had spread through the valley like wildfire after the incident at Marcus's farm. Not the whole truth. That story was too incredible for most people to believe. But enough. Two gifted children, rescued from an abusive situation, would be performing to raise awareness about missing children. The reality was far more complex. In the 3 weeks since the attack, Marcus and Sarah had been quietly working with federal investigators to uncover the full scope of the conspiracy surrounding St. Mary's Children's Sanctuary. The Morrison Foundation's financial records had revealed payments to dozens of facilities across the country, all specializing in children with unusual abilities. But tonight wasn't about conspiracy or corruption. Tonight was about music, hope, and the power of community to protect its own. Places, everyone, called Janet Morrison. No relation to the other Morrisons, who taught elementary school and had volunteered to coordinate the evening. The irony of her name wasn't lost on anyone, but she'd thrown herself into the project with the fierce dedication of someone who'd spent her life protecting children. Marcus stood near the back of the center, nervous energy radiating from every inch of his tall frame. He wore his only suit, the one he'd bought for Emma's funeral and never thought he'd need again. Tonight felt like a resurrection of sorts, a return to life after 4 years of merely surviving. The girls appeared beside him like small angels in matching white dresses Sarah had found at a shop in Billings. Lily carried a small bouquet of winter flowers, while Rose clutched a folded piece of paper, their song list, though Marcus suspected they wouldn't need it. "You ready for this?" he asked them. They nodded in unison, their faces serene with the kind of confidence that only came from absolute certainty in one's purpose. "Remember," Lily said softly, "we're not performing for them. We're singing with them." Sarah joined them, looking elegant in a simple black dress that Marcus couldn't help but notice brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Over the past month, their partnership in protecting the girls had evolved into something deeper, more complex. They hadn't defined it yet, hadn't put words to the way they moved around each other like dancers who'd been practicing together for years. "The whole town's here," she told Marcus quietly, "and some people from outside town. The story spreading, Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility in equal measure. Tonight wasn't just about entertaining their neighbors. It was about announcing to the world that Lily and Rose Morrison were alive, protected, and ready to reclaim their heritage. The lights dimmed, and Janet Morrison took the stage with a microphone that squealed briefly before settling into compliance. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight for something special. Over the past month, our community has been blessed with the arrival of two very special young ladies. Lily and Rose have been through more than any children should have to endure, but they've found safety and love here in Pine Ridge Valley. Applause rippled through the audience, warm and welcoming. Marcus spotted familiar faces throughout the crowd. The mechanic who'd fixed his truck without being asked. The librarian who'd helped Sarah with her research. The sheriff who'd quietly made sure Marcus's property was under extra protection. Tonight, they'd like to share their gift with all of us. But more than that, they'd like to help us remember something important, that every child deserves a safe place to call home. The girls walked onto the stage hand in hand, their steps measured and graceful. They positioned themselves at the center. No microphones, no instruments, just two children and their voices. For a moment, silence filled the community center. Then Rose began to sing. Her voice rose pure and clear, a melody that seemed to lift directly from the heart of human longing. It was Amazing Grace, but not any version anyone had ever heard before. This was the song as it might have been sung by angels, each note placed with precision that spoke of divine inspiration. Lily joined in, her voice weaving around her sisters in harmonies that shouldn't have been possible with only two singers. But there they were, thirds, fifths, complex intervals that created the illusion of a full choir. The effect on the audience was immediate and profound. Marcus watched as faces throughout the crowd began to transform. The tired grocery store clerk, who worked double shifts to support her elderly mother, found herself smiling through tears. The gruff rancher, who hadn't spoken to his son in 5 years, pulled out his phone with shaking hands. But it was more than emotional manipulation. Marcus could feel it himself, a presence in the music that went beyond mere sound. It was as if the girls were channeling something eternal, something that connected every person in that room to their deepest, truest selves. As the final notes of Amazing Grace faded, the silence that followed was sacred. Then slowly, applause began to build, not the enthusiastic clapping of entertainment, but the reverent appreciation of witnessing something holy. The girls weren't finished. Without pause, they began their second song, a lullaby that started soft and sweet before evolving into something more complex. Marcus recognized it as the melody Emma had hummed to Caleb, but transformed, expanded, turned into a universal expression of parental love. During the third song, an original composition that seemed to be about finding home after being lost, something remarkable happened. Members of the audience began to hum along, their voices joining the harmony in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The music was teaching them, guiding them, showing them parts they'd never heard before, but somehow knew. By the time the girls reached their final song, the entire community center had become a choir. Every voice in the room had found its place in the harmony, creating a sound that was bigger than the sum of its parts. It was Silent Night, but reimagined as a celebration of found family, of communities that chose to protect their most vulnerable members. When the music finally ended, no one moved. The silence stretched for long moments, as if the entire room was reluctant to return to ordinary speech after experiencing something so transcendent. Then Sheriff Tom Bradley stood up in the front row, his weathered face wet with tears. "I don't know what that was," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustic space. "But I know this. Any community that can produce something that beautiful is a community worth protecting." The applause that followed was different from anything Marcus had ever heard. It wasn't just appreciation for a performance. It was a commitment, a promise, a declaration of war against anyone who would harm these children or any children. As people began to file out, many stopped to speak with Marcus and Sarah, words of support, offers of help. Quiet promises that Lily and Rose would never want for anything as long as Pine Ridge Valley existed. Dr. William Chen, Sarah's father-in-law, had driven up from Denver for the performance. He pulled Marcus aside as the crowd thinned. "I've been a pediatrician for 40 years," he said quietly. "I've worked with gifted children, children with special needs, children who've survived trauma that would break most adults, but I've never seen anything like what those girls just did." "What do you mean?" Dr. Chen glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. "They didn't just sing to those people. Marcus, they sang into them. Every person in this room just experienced the same thing. A moment of perfect emotional clarity, a connection to something larger than themselves. That's not performance. That's something else entirely." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December weather. "Are you saying they're dangerous?" "I'm saying they're powerful, and power like that, it's going to attract attention. Not all of it good." As if summoned by his words, Sarah appeared at Marcus's elbow, her face tense with concern. In her hand was her cell phone, the screen displaying a news website. "We have a problem," she said quietly. The headline read, "Missing Morrison Heiress's Surface in Montana, Custody Battle Brewing." Below it was a photo clearly taken through the community center's windows during the performance, showing Lily and Rose on stage with their faces clearly visible. "It's already been picked up by 3 major networks," Sarah continued. "Harrison Morrison issued a statement an hour ago claiming the girls have been illegally held and demanding their immediate return to family custody." Marcus felt his protective instincts flare. "Like hell. There's more." Sarah scrolled down to show another article. "Apparently, there are 12 other families across the country who've come forward claiming they have children from St. Mary's. Children who've been in hiding since the facility closed." Dr. Chen whistled low. "This is about to become a national story." Marcus looked across the emptying community center to where Lily and Rose sat on the edge of the stage, still in their white dresses, sharing a bag of cookies someone had brought them. They looked so small, so innocent, so utterly unaware that their world was about to be turned upside down again. "Then we better make sure it's told right," Marcus said grimly. Outside, snow began to fall again, and in the distance, the lights of television news vans were already visible on the highway, racing toward Pine Ridge Valley like wolves drawn to the scent of blood. The media circus arrived with the efficiency of a military invasion. By dawn, Pine Ridge Valley's main street looked like a disaster zone. Satellite trucks, news vans, and rental cars with out-of-state plates lined both sides of the road. Reporters clutched coffee cups and microphones, their breath visible in the cold air as they waited for someone, anyone, to give them a story worth broadcasting. Marcus stood at his kitchen window, watching the chaos through a pair of binoculars. 15 trucks that I can see, and those are just the ones on the main road." Sarah sat at the table with her laptop, monitoring news coverage while the girls ate breakfast with the focused concentration of children who'd learned not to waste food. "It's getting worse. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they're all running with variations of the same story. Mysterious children with miraculous voices seems to be the theme. What are they saying about us? Nothing good. You're being portrayed as either a hero or a kidnapper. Depending on which network you watch, I'm apparently either a doctor who rescued traumatized children or a woman who's been brainwashed by a cult." Marcus laughed bitterly. "A cult, apparently. Our community concert last night has been interpreted by some as evidence of mind control. The fact that everyone in the audience was visibly moved by the girls singing is being used as proof that they have some kind of supernatural influence over people." Lily looked up from her cereal bowl. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," Marcus said quickly. "Some people are just confused about what happened last night. They didn't understand the music," Rose added matter-of-factly. "Some people are afraid of things they don't understand." Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, then noticed it was a local area code. "Dr. Chen, this is Sheriff Bradley. We've got a situation developing downtown. The news crews are getting aggressive, and there's a group of people claiming to be Morrison family representatives demanding to search properties for the girls. I think you and Marcus need to get down here. On our way. Marcus grabbed his coat, then stopped. The girls cannot come with us, Sarah finished, and cannot stay here alone. As if reading their minds, a familiar voice called from the front porch. Hello, anyone home? Dr. William Chen stood at the door, stamping snow from his boots. Behind him was a woman Marcus didn't recognize, elderly, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that commanded respect. Dad, what are you doing here? Figured you might need backup. This is Judge Elizabeth Morrison, retired federal judge. No relation to the other Morrisons despite the name. She's been following this case since the St. Mary's closure. Judge Morrison stepped forward, her keen eyes taking in the domestic scene. Breakfast dishes on the table, children's artwork on the refrigerator, the unmistakable signs of a home where love lived. Mr. Sterling, Dr. Chen, I'm here to offer my services as a child advocate. I've been investigating the Morrison Foundation and St. Mary's Children's Sanctuary for months. What's happening to these children is part of a pattern that goes back decades. What kind of pattern? Marcus asked. Gifted children disappearing into private facilities? Families being told their children died or were transferred to other institutions? Massive inheritance fraud. St. Mary's was just the tip of the iceberg. Lily and Rose had stopped eating, their attention focused entirely on Judge Morrison. After a moment, Rose spoke. Are you here to take us away? Judge Morrison knelt to their level, her stern expression softening. I'm here to make sure no one takes you anywhere you don't want to go. But I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be very brave and very honest. Can you do that? Both girls nodded. Good. First question, do you feel safe here with Mr. Sterling and Dr. Chen? Yes, they said in unison. Do you want to stay here? Yes. Have either of them ever hurt you or made you do anything that scared you? No. They saved us. Judge Morrison stood, her expression grim with determination. Then that's what we're going to focus on. Mr. Sterling, Dr. Chen, you're about to be subjected to the most intense legal scrutiny of your lives. The Morrison Foundation has resources, connections, and a vested interest in discrediting your claims, but they also have something they didn't count on. What's that? The truth and 12 other families who are about to come forward with children who were supposedly lost forever. Sarah's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a number from Washington, D.C. Dr. Chen, this is Agent Jennifer Walsh, FBI. I'm calling about Lily and Rose Morrison. We need to talk. The FBI field office in Great Falls, Montana, was not designed for comfort. Agent Jennifer Walsh led Marcus, Sarah, and Judge Morrison through a maze of cubicles and conference rooms to a secure area where sensitive investigations were conducted. She was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp intelligence that missed nothing. Before we begin, Agent Walsh said as they settled around a conference table, I want you to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. The Morrison Foundation case has been expanded into a multi-state investigation involving child trafficking, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Marcus felt his blood chill. Murder. Emma Sterling's death was not an accident. We've recovered evidence from the crash site that suggests her brake lines were cut. She was killed because she was getting too close to exposing what was happening at St. Mary's and other facilities. The room fell silent. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white with rage and grief. Emma, his beautiful, brave Emma had died because she tried to save children. How many children? Sarah asked quietly. So far, we've identified 43 children who were reported dead or missing from various specialty facilities over the past 6 years. Children with unusual abilities, musical prodigies, mathematical geniuses, children with perfect memory or extraordinary artistic talent. Agent Walsh opened a thick file and spread photographs across the table. Marcus recognized Lily and Rose immediately, but there were others, children of various ages and ethnicities, all with the same haunted look in their eyes. These children were valuable, not just for their inheritance potential, but for their abilities. We believe St. Mary's and similar facilities were conducting research into the nature of genius, trying to understand how to replicate or enhance these gifts. Enhancement, how Judge Morrison asked. Experimental drugs, isolation techniques, controlled environments designed to push the children's abilities to their limits. Many of the children we've recovered show signs of medical intervention, surgical scars, evidence of long-term pharmaceutical exposure. Marcus thought of the scars on Lily and Rose's wrists. The girls had surgical marks when we found them. Medical bracelets, probably for monitoring vital signs during sessions. The children weren't patients, Mr. Sterling. They were test subjects. Sarah leaned forward. Where are the other children now? Hidden, like Lily and Rose. They were rescued by a network of people who realized what was happening. Your wife was part of that network, Mr. Sterling. She saved at least 12 children before she was killed. Agent Walsh pulled out another file, this one marked with Emma's name. We found this in a safety deposit box registered under one of her aliases. She'd been documenting everything: financial transfers, medical records, testimony from children who managed to escape. The file contained hundreds of pages of carefully documented evidence. Photos of St. Mary's facilities that looked more like laboratories than schools. Financial records showing payments from wealthy families to have their problematic children studied. And at the back, a handwritten letter in Emma's familiar script. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead, but the children are safe, scattered throughout Montana with families who will protect them. Marcus, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry I had to lie. But these children needed someone to fight for them, and I couldn't stand by and let them suffer. Marcus's vision blurred as he continued reading Emma's final words. The network knows where each child is placed, when it's safe, when the truth comes out. They'll help reunite them with their new families. Tell Marcus I love him. Tell him that saving these children was the most important thing I ever did. Tell him that if anything happens to me, he'll know what to do when the time comes. Agent Walsh gave him a moment to compose himself before continuing. Mr. Sterling, your wife's investigation is the reason we're here today. Her evidence is the foundation of our case against the Morrison Foundation and everyone involved in this conspiracy. What do you need from us? Sarah asked. We need Lily and Rose to testify about what happened at St. Mary's. We need their memories, their experiences, their testimony about the other children. It won't be easy. They're young. They've been traumatized, and defense attorneys will try to discredit everything they say. Judge Morrison spoke up. The girls have been through enough. Surely there's another way. There might be. Agent Walsh pulled out one final file. We've been monitoring communications from the Morrison Foundation since this story broke. They're planning something big, a public relations campaign to discredit you and reclaim the children. But if we can get ahead of them, if we can control the narrative, she looked directly at Marcus. What if we told the whole story, everything? Emma's investigation, the network of hidden children, the truth about what these facilities were really doing? Make it public before they can spin it. You mean like a press conference? I mean like the biggest revelation of child abuse and corporate conspiracy in decades. Full transparency, complete disclosure, and the girls at the center of it, not as victims, but as survivors who are brave enough to speak the truth. Marcus looked at Sarah, then at Judge Morrison. The weight of the decision felt enormous. Exposing the truth would protect the girls and the other children, but it would also make them targets, turn them into symbols whether they wanted to be or not. It's their choice, he said finally. If Lily and Rose want to tell their story, we'll support them. But if they want to stay hidden, stay safe, then that's what we'll do. Agent Walsh nodded. Fair enough. But Mr. Sterling, the other children, the 12 your wife saved, they're ready to come forward. They've been waiting for someone to lead the way. What are you saying? I'm saying that if Lily and Rose stand up and tell their story, they won't be standing alone. There's an entire generation of children ready to expose what was done to them. Your wife started something. Mr. Sterling, the question is whether you and those girls are ready to finish it. The decision came. as most important decisions do. In a moment of crystalline clarity that felt both inevitable and terrifying, Marcus sat with Lily and Rose on the living room floor that evening, building a puzzle of a mountain landscape while snow fell softly outside. Agent Walsh had left hours ago, but her words still echoed in the quiet house. "Girls," Marcus said carefully, "I need to ask you about something important." They looked up from the puzzle pieces, their identical gray eyes solemn and attentive. "The FBI agent who was here today, she wants to know if you'd be willing to tell people about what happened at St. Mary's, about the bad things that were done to you and other children." Rose's hand found Lily's automatically, their fingers interlacing with practiced ease. "Would we have to go back there?" Lily asked. "No, sweetheart, never. But you would have to remember some scary things and talk about them in front of a lot of people." Would it help the other children?" Rose asked. "The ones Mama Emma saved." Marcus felt his heart clench at the casual way she referred to Emma, as if his wife had simply stepped out of the room rather than been dead for 4 years. "Yes, it would help them a lot." The girls exchanged one of their wordless communications, a look that conveyed volumes. Finally, Lily spoke. "We want to help, but we're scared." "What scares you most?" "What if people don't believe us?" Rose said quietly. "What if they think we're lying?" Sarah, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, came and knelt beside them. "Do you remember what happened at the concert last night? How everyone in the room felt the truth of your music?" They nodded. "When you tell your story, when you speak about what happened, people will feel that same truth, not because of any special power, but because truth has its own music. And you girls know that music better than anyone." That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Marcus and Sarah sat at the kitchen table making lists, contact information for media outlets, legal documents that would need to be filed, security arrangements for the press conference that was beginning to feel inevitable. "Are we doing the right thing?" Marcus asked for the dozenth time. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, "but I know Emma would be proud. She started this fight, and now we get to finish it." Marcus looked at the pile of Emma's journals Agent Walsh had returned to him. 4 years of investigation, documentation, and preparation for a day she wouldn't live to see. But maybe that was the point. Maybe some fights were bigger than any one person, requiring multiple generations to see them through. His phone rang just after midnight. The caller ID showed a number from Oregon. "Mr. Sterling, this is David Kim. I have one of the children from St. Mary's, a boy named Michael. We saw the news coverage, and he wants to talk to Lily and Rose." Marcus sat up straighter. "Agent Walsh said there were others. 12 of us. Families who took in children when Emma Sterling brought them to us. We've been waiting, Mr. Sterling, waiting for someone to say it was safe to come forward. And now my son says he's ready to tell his story, but only if he's not alone, only if there are other children standing with him." Over the next hour, Marcus's phone rang 11 more times. Families from across Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, all with the same story: children saved by Emma, children who'd been hidden and protected, children who were ready to speak their truth by morning. The plan had crystallized into something both simple and revolutionary. Not just a press conference, but a gathering, a reunion of children who'd thought they were alone, families who'd thought they were isolated, and a community ready to stand up and say, "Not on our watch." Judge Morrison arrived at dawn with a van full of legal documents and a grim expression that somehow managed to convey both determination and hope. "The Morrison Foundation filed an emergency custody motion last night," she announced. "They're claiming the girls are in immediate danger from a radical cult that's using them for propaganda purposes." "When's the hearing?" Sarah asked. "Thursday. But here's the interesting part. They're demanding it be held in a federal courthouse in Billings, with full media access. They want this to be public." Marcus frowned. "Why would they want publicity if they're trying to hide their crimes?" "Because they think they can control the narrative. Rich, respectable family, trying to save innocent children from delusional kidnappers. They've hired the best PR firm in the country. Then we better make sure our story gets told first, Sarah said grimly. Judge Morrison smiled for the first time since arriving. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say, because I've been making some calls of my own, and it turns out there are a lot of people who've been waiting for this day. She pulled out a folder thick with documents. Senators who've been investigating child trafficking, journalists who've been following the missing children cases, child welfare advocates who've suspected institutional abuse for years. They're all converging on Montana. Mr. Sterling, this isn't just about Lily and Rose anymore. Marcus looked toward the stairs where he could hear the girls getting dressed, their soft voices mixing with the sound of running water. In a few hours, their lives would change forever. They would go from being two rescued children to the faces of a movement that could reshape how society protected its most vulnerable members. What if they can't handle it? He asked quietly. Then we'll be there to catch them. Sarah replied, all of us. That's what family does. Outside, the media circus was growing larger by the hour. But now, instead of feeling like a siege, it began to feel like an army gathering for a righteous war. And at the center of it all, two little girls who just wanted to sing their truth to a world that desperately needed to hear it. The Pine Ridge Community Center had been transformed overnight into something resembling a modern-day courthouse. Federal marshals checked credentials at every entrance, while technicians from a dozen news networks set up cameras and satellite equipment. The stage where Lily and Rose had sung just days before now held a long table covered with microphones and flanked by American flags. Marcus stood at the back of the building, wearing his best suit and feeling like he was about to walk into battle, which, in many ways, he was. Sarah stood beside him in a navy blue dress that made her look both professional and approachable. Judge Morrison's suggestion for projecting the right image. Remember, Judge Morrison said, appearing at their elbows with her usual perfect timing. This isn't a trial, it's a truth-telling. Let the girls speak in their own words, in their own way. The power of their testimony isn't in legal precision. It's in authentic experience. Through the community center's windows, Marcus could see the crowd gathering outside. Families who'd driven through the night to be here, reporters from national networks, federal agents in unmarked cars, and somewhere in that crowd, the other families, the ones who'd protected Emma's rescued children for 4 years, waiting for this moment. Daddy! Rose's voice was small but steady. She and Lily stood behind him in matching blue dresses, their hair braided with white ribbons. They looked impossibly young and impossibly brave. Yes, sweetheart. Are you going to tell them about Mama Emma? Marcus knelt to their level, his voice thick with emotion. Every word. The whole world's going to know what she did for you and the other children. Good, Lily said firmly. She was a hero. Agent Walsh appeared with a clipboard and an expression of barely controlled excitement. We're ready to begin. Mr. Sterling, you'll speak first. Then Dr. Chen, then the girls if they feel ready. After that, we'll bring in representatives from the other families. What about the Morrison Foundation? They'll have their turn this afternoon, but this morning belongs to the truth. Marcus took one last look around the community center that had become the epicenter of a national story. In a few minutes, he would walk onto that stage and tell the world about Emma's secret life, about 2 girls found freezing in the snow, about a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of corporate power. But first, he had something else to do. He turned to the small crowd of friends and neighbors who'd gathered at the back of the center. Sheriff Bradley, Martha the librarian, Janet Morrison the schoolteacher, Dr. Chen Sr., and dozens of others who'd welcomed Lily and Rose into their community without question. I just want to say thank you, he began, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustic space. 4 months ago, I was a broken man living in an empty house, convinced that the best parts of my life were behind me. Then 2 little girls showed up in a snowstorm and reminded me what family really means. He paused, looking at each familiar face. You could have been suspicious. You could have called the authorities, demanded proof, insisted on following protocol, Instead, you opened your hearts and your homes to children who needed safety more than they needed paperwork. Sarah stepped forward, her own voice strong and clear. What we're about to do in there, it's going to change everything. The attention, the scrutiny, the way people see our community. Some of you might wish we'd kept this quiet, handled it privately. But those girls in there, she gestured toward Lily and Rose, they're not just our children now. They're symbols of every child who's been failed by systems that were supposed to protect them. And if we can save them, really save them, then maybe we can save others too. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward, his weathered face serious. This community has seen a lot of changes over the years. Families moving away, businesses closing, young people leaving for opportunities elsewhere. But today, right now, Pine Ridge Valley is exactly where the world needs it to be. He looked directly at Marcus. You've given us something to be proud of. Son, something worth fighting for. Judge Morrison checked her watch. Time to go. Marcus took Lily's hand. Sarah took Rose's. And together they walked toward the stage where the truth was waiting to be told. The community center had filled to capacity, with overflow crowds watching on screens set up in the church across the street. As they took their seats at the long table, Marcus could see faces in the crowd that would stay with him forever. Parents clutching photos of missing children, survivors of institutional abuse, advocates who'd spent their careers fighting for the powerless. But it was the faces in the front row that mattered most. 12 families, each with a child between the ages of 8 and 16. Children who'd been hidden for 4 years, protected by people who understood that sometimes love meant breaking rules. Agent Walsh stepped to the podium, her voice carrying clearly through the packed space. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. What you're about to hear is the story of a conspiracy that spans multiple states and dozens of institutions. It's the story of children who were stolen from their families, of abilities that were exploited for profit, of a woman who gave her life to expose the truth. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the crowd. But more than that, it's the story of what happens when ordinary people decide to do extraordinary things, when communities choose to protect rather than ignore, when love becomes stronger than law. Marcus stood and walked to the podium, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. For a moment, the magnitude of the moment threatened to overwhelm him. Then he saw Lily and Rose, sitting straight and proud at the table, and found his voice. My name is Marcus Sterling, he began. 4 months ago, I found 2 little girls freezing to death in a snowstorm. I thought I was saving them. He looked directly into the nearest camera, knowing his words were being broadcast live across the country. I was wrong. They saved me. And today, they're going to save a lot of other children too. The truth-telling had begun.